Hello and welcome to Above the Curve. I'm your host, Andrew Strout. I'm here with Todd Anderson.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And Brad Nelson.
I don't know why he let Todd go first. Should introduce me first. Just saying, just saying.
Oh, I see Brad's head is just as small as it ever was.
Yep. Yeah. I'm here with Todd and Brad. Todd and Brad. Todd
Yes.
first.
Yes.
And we were all winners this weekend. We all got to play with some sweet new cards. We were coming off of a sweet pre-release weekend. Todd?
I don't know how good of a weekend it really was or how much of a winner I was because I had to play two-headed giant with this guy.
We were winners. Don't listen to him. Todd, how was your weekend?
Well, I also got to play two-headed giant, but I played on Sunday with my wife Callie, and I built her a sweet 4-color green deck with multiple font of fertility, so she could ramp her growth into things like Sea God's Revenge. She had doubles of the 7-mana Flametongue Kavu Dragon, and just like so many cool things going on. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time.
Nice, nice. Brad, I know that you already mentioned cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, I mean,
we joined heads for the weekend.
And to be honest, I thought it was going to be a really awful experience, like we were going to butt heads the entire time. But I mean, to be fair, we both played awful. It was unbelievable.
Maybe a little bit. We definitely learned that there's at least one card in Journey into Nyx that is very aptly named. There's a slight possibility that this weekend our hubris was showing.
It was showing a lot actually. So what ended up happening is we were playing against the director of Above the Curve, and we just were like, oh, we got him dead if we just bounce this creature and we win, right? And so we hubris their one blocking creature. We untap and realize we're like 8 points off of lethal.
Yeah.
And now we just set ourselves way back because we bounced an irrelevant creature.
Yep. I blame Brad. I didn't fact check him. He's just like, oh, I think we're dead if we do this. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Well,
sounds
we
good.
were dead if we did that, so you're correct.
They're dead. Yeah. Yes, in fact. Yeah. So we powered through. Ended up winning 3 of our 4 matches.
Yeah, I mean that. Good numbers for 2 Pro Tour top 8 competitors.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that me and Callie had the same record as 2 Pro Tour top 8 competitors combined.
Yeah.
Two-headed giant, skill-intensive format.
It is. 200 giant, a sweet
Yeah.
format. One that I wish we got a little more, a few more opportunities to play it.
Well, I mean, they would have made it a professional format if it wasn't for Slivers and that Storm and Slivers. They're
Yeah,
like,
that
we're going to put this format into play with Slivers and Storm. This sounds like a perfect combination.
That is fair. That is fair. Well, they might give it another shot sometime down the line. But for now, we need to get into actual like one-on-one Journey into Nyx. Let's talk about some of the experiences we had with these cards. Let's get to the top 5 countdown. It seemed like the biggest story that came out of this pre-release weekend was just how absurdly good the white promo rare was.
No. I'm going to let you finish about Dawnbringer Charioteer because that's one of my favorite cards, but the biggest story from this weekend had to be the God Packs.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yes, the God Packs, there was a lot of hype around that for sure. Everyone wanted to open one.
Yeah, I wanted to open one, but not because I think having a bunch of gods as like, 15 cards in your sealed pool would be good. But just because it's like opening $150 or whatever.
I just wanted to open one so more people would be like, oh, Brett's so lucky. I mean, I did open a bunch of Mana Confluences and Elspeths.
Yeah, not bad. But it's not like the $200 golden ticket.
Yeah.
I mean, it would still be very good in your sealed pool. It's just like whatever your 2 colors were in sealed, you have 3 gods.
Yeah.
It's really sweet. What I really want, I wish that they had printed like a Maze's End type card, like a win condition where it was just like if you have all 15 gods in play, you win the game.
Well, I do feel like if I had 6 gods in play and they were devoted to each other, I probably would win the game already too.
All right, that is fair. You don't really need help if you have all 15 gods.
Yeah.
I just want that to be a goal that I can.
Just
I
a
can
continuing
work
theme, just 15 of this one thing in play or 10 of this one thing in play.
Yeah, for sure.
I hate those.
Yeah.
All right, to get back on track though, Dawnbringer Charioteers, the card, the promo that you got if you chose white at the pre-release, and it seemed like everyone I talked to who chose that card was really, really impressed by it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I ended up playing the midnight pre-release, and the hype, the excitement, the hour, everyone's seeing the cards for the first time, and after I started building my deck, I looked around and I saw that like the white players almost were half of the field. Everyone wanted to be devoted to white for Dawnbringer Charioteers. And so I looked at this Glare Heresy in my pool, and I looked at all my other removal, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to main deck all this stuff. And so I just main decked my Glare, and a couple opponents gave me a weird look when I would just like turn 3 Glare their thing on the board like game 1. But the card super impressed me. I think, like you can see from all my Versus videos, I thought that the card might see constructed play, so it was an unbelievable creature for the Devotion pre-releases.
Yeah, I mean, just comparing it to like the other promo cards in the seeded packs or whatever, it was just like above and beyond like the best one, I think. But I actually ended up choosing black as mine, and I got multiples of the giant that gives all your opponent's creatures -1/-1 for Constellation, and that one was fine. But it never killed my opponent, you know. And, you know, it's no Baneslayer Angel that gets better when you're, you know, making a battleship.
Speaking of Baneslayer Angel, I did find the one trump to Dawnbringer Charioteers was Hero's Bane, the green-seeded devotion creature.
Okay.
Because, like, if both were just unchecked, I don't care how big you can get your Dawnbringer Charioteers, like, the 32-32 or 64-64 is going to kill you.
Yeah, I actually saw a picture where someone at the pre-release had a 10-24-10-24 Heroes Bane. Yeah. I thought it was actually a weird play on, like, the 2048 game, like that was the next step or whatever, but no, just a giant Heroes Bane.
Yeah, I would love to know like just how big someone got a Hero's Bane at the pre-release.
I mean, if someone got
32-32, and
if someone got it bigger than 10-24, I'm good luck.
I feel like if I got one that big, I wouldn't even want to attack with it. The goal for me would be to see how much
find
bigger
another
I could
one
get it.
and fuse them together.
Yes,
and
finally
creature.
win 2048.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's talk about a different card. This next card is one that Brad and I had a pretty sweet experience with. Talk a little about Market Festival.
Well, the first thing about Market Festival that makes me happy is it's kind of like a trading post, you know, because you buy and sell things and you're happy. And I know it's a stretch, but when we were building our two-headed giant decks, we saw that we had a black-white deck that was just super powerful, but it had a lot of the Constellation 1/4s that drain your opponents when enchantments come to play. So we wanted to fill this deck up, and making cuts for it was difficult. So my suggestion was to actually only play 16 lands and the green-blue deck to run Market Festival. And that would allow us to, on turn 4, always enchant one of the black-white's lands and give it 6 mana on turn 4. Or if they don't hit a land drop, they'd at least have, you know, a high number of lands, maybe even just 5 on turn 4 that just help cast all the spells. And I'm not gonna lie, you just did not see it. You really were just like blind to it.
I was skeptical at first.
Yeah, I mean, I actually just want to say that I think that it's really cool how Two-Headed Giant really puts a spotlight on different cards, you know, because I actually don't think Market Festival is very good in Limited in general. You know, it's a 4-mana ramp spell, you know, that helps you get to your 7 drops on turn 5 or whatever. Like, that's not really what I want to be doing in Limited. But when you get to, you know, see it in a different light, in a different format, being just the genius behind, oh, I'm going to play this card just to ramp my opponent or my teammate, you know, like that's just crazy. It's just so cool, and it makes me love Two-Headed Giant. You know, like the format's really fun. I wish they would have more events with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think one of the big reasons why they don't make it a competitive format is because of all the cards that say each opponent, and that's all we tried doing was giving Market Festivals to the black-white deck because all the cards in that deck were saying each opponent.
Yeah.
So it was just so absurd. It's like we played the 5/3 for 6 Constellation creature that makes them discard on turn 4, and we're like, if you don't kill this, every enchantment is going to rip apart your guys' hand.
Yeah, I think that was we had that 6-drop, we had the 5-drop, the black promo rare that gives all your creatures -1/-1. Basically, we just crammed every enchantment we could into that black-white deck. But what really sold me on Market Festival, because again, I was skeptical at first, was basically you pointed to that deck and you're like, what does that deck want to be doing on turn 4 every single game? And I was like, play a 6-drop?
Yep.
Which is exactly what Market Festival allowed us to do. We had 4 of that card in our pool.
We did not. We played 2. Should have probably played 3.
I was skeptical, and I decided that we'll hedge a little. We'll just play 2. But you're right. We definitely should have played 3. But yeah, Two-Headed Giant. It's so cool to see weird interactions like that don't normally come up.
Oh, for sure.
Let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about Armament of Nyx next.
Sure. Armament of Nyx is a really interesting and like quasi-removal card simply because it has the ability to either be a removal spell for one of your opponent's creatures or sometimes a Hail Mary win condition for yourself. It feels very similar to Bonds of Faith out of Innistrad block, if you guys have ever played with that, where, you know, if you put it on your opponent's creature, if it wasn't a human, it would pacify it. Whereas, you know, if you had this human that you wanted to get a little bit bigger or deal a few points of extra damage, you could put it on your own guy. So it was really like this double-sided card, and I'm really a fan of those things in Limited because they just have more uses. And I think it's important to have you know, situational cards at times because the threat diversity is so, you know, unique. But the fact that, like, your cards can like match up really well against theirs, depending on what they play versus what you play. It's just a really sweet, interesting build of a card, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love the that this format feels a lot like Innistrad block in the sense of there's a lot of flavor and there's a lot of situational removal. And I love situational removal because this card does let them block with these big monsters, but it just gives you the tempo. And so I really like that it'll come down in your important times when you're trying to set up things, but on the same way, you can get the double strike out of one of your guys just to deal lethal at the last points of a game, and it's just a very flexible card in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Todd, I know a card that you mentioned you were a little surprised by was Font of Fertility.
Yeah, I mean, I was first saw this card spoiled, and I was like, oh, it's just, Wayfarer's Bauble, but for green, which is kind of cool. And I think it actually might end up seeing some constructive play at some point, simply because there's not really a whole lot of rampant growth effects in Standard right now, aside from creature-based ones like Sylvan Caryatid, Elvish Mystic, things like that. But I think this card's actually really cool for Limited because it's another way for you to branch out into multiple colors and let you do really cool things. We had like Peregrination, I think that's the one from Born of the Gods. Yep. Kodama's Reach that costs 1 extra that lets you scry. There's like a bunch of different cards from each set that allow you to really hit multiple colors quickly, so that you can actually play these like 3, maybe even 4 and 5 color green decks in Limited, and then we get to see like more Chromanticore decks and just people just having more fun in Limited, and I'm all for that. And Font of Fertility was just really awesome for me at the pre-release too. So
I don't think it's a bad card. Like during the set reviews, Evan even said that this was the worst card in the set. And now I understand that set reviews are pure hyperbole, but the thing about the card is that Rampant Growth and Farseek and Kodama's Reach have always been some of the most broken Magic cards for green ramp decks. Like, they take over formats because getting to 6 mana by turn 4 is busted. So this card is a fixed version of a ramp spell that will do some awesome things. Like, a green deck wants to ramp, but it could also want to cast cards like Anger of the Gods. So you don't want to play your ramp creatures into Anger of the Gods as well. So I can see this seeing some constructive play, but yes, it is worse than Rampant Growth. That's because Rampant Growth was a little bit too busted.
Yeah, for sure. And in this limited format in particular, I think Voyaging Satyr is well regarded as the most important green common. And this card is basically just another proxy Voyaging Satyr.
Well, now I think the 2-1 is a little bit better, the Elk or whatever.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, yeah, so there are 2 proxies then in this set for Voyaging Satyr. So green decks are going to be able to ramp a little more consistently, which is a pretty big game for them. The last card that I want to talk about is another card that you and I had a pretty good experience with playing Two-Headed Giant. We had 2 Sigiled Starfish in our blue deck.
Don't you mean Patrick Starfish?
I meant Sigiled Starfish.
Well, Patrick Starfish.
I don't go in for these cutesy nicknames.
Well, Patrick Starfish is not a cute name. It's what it should have been named. They just made it wrong. But I was super impressed by this card because I didn't think it was that great of an ability until I just realized that I will be always able to manipulate my deck at all times. Like, Scry is a powerful mechanic. A 0/3 for 2 isn't that bad in a blue deck because you're trying to build tempo and you're trying to get through your deck. So every time you Sudden Storm or Voyaging Den, you're digging deeper into your deck and your opponent's going to draw worse and worse, where you're always going to hit spells or more consistently, or you always make your land drop. So keeping a 2-lander with this is fine because you can just upkeep Scry, try to find that 3rd land if you missed it on turn 2. So I'm a big fan of this card. I think it is way better than I originally thought, and I can't wait to see what it's like in draft as opposed to pre-release sealed.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so the pre-release was not the only thing that happened this weekend. At the very tail end of the weekend, at midnight on Sunday, there was also
something that didn't happen.
There was also a strong anticlimax.
Yeah.
There was a banned and restricted announcement, or rather a lack of one, really. We're going to talk about that in the soapbox. This was one of the first banned and restricted announcements in a while where no one really knew what was going to happen. And it turns out what happened was nothing. there were no changes.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about that?
Well, I'm sorry, I'll take it first. So my biggest fear was that Birthing Pod was going to be a dominant factor over the course of the next PTQ season, and this is the last time we're going to be able to have a ban or restricted before the PTQ season for Modern actually starts during the summertime. I think Birthing Pod is just kind of an unfair Magic card that allows people to kind of cast Demonic Tutor plus Dark Ritual every turn once they get to untap with their Birthing Pod. But at the same time, like, it is very comparable to cards that are already on the ban list. I think Green Sun Zenith does very similar things to, like these green decks that are based around, like searching through your deck for very specific targets and things like that. But at the same time, I think Green Sun Zenith is probably just worse than Birthing Pod. You know, like maybe when people were afraid that Green Sun Zenith was going to bottleneck the format and everyone was going to play like, you know, one Dryad Arbor, one Gaddock Teague, one one Kosali Pride Mage, and just all these bullets, and all the green decks are going to look the same. But at the moment, I don't think that many green decks would actually want to play Green Sun Zenith right now. So, I mean, I'm all for unbanning cards if you want to, but if you're not going to unban anything, then I think Birthing Pod should have gotten the axe.
All right, well, I completely disagree with that. I think Birthing Pod is exactly what you want an Eternal format to be centered around, because it is a creature combo deck. And the thing about external formats is they're never about creatures. You never see deck lists with like 8 spells and the rest of them are just mono creatures. You always see broken combo decks like Storm or Dredge or Show and Tell or Affinity. I know Affinity is like creature driven, but it's more of a combo deck as well. Like, this is a deck that literally is accelerating into other creatures, and it's all kept together by Birthing Pod, where what's the easiest kind of permanent to deal with? Creatures.
Yeah,
every deck's going to have removal.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that point. However, all the creatures that are in these Birthing Pod decks are not answered by traditional removal. You have Murderous Redcap, Kitchen Finks, Voice Resurgence, all these cards that just generate multiple 2-for-1s against like Lightning Bolt decks and, you know, actual spot removal things. The only real card in the format that I think keeps Birthing Pod in check is Anger of the Gods. Yeah. You know, and yes, Anger of the Gods is really good, but like, if you're not a red deck and you're trying to play fair, you're just never going to be on the same level as a Birthing Pod deck, because none of your removal interacts with them the way you want to. I think the Birthing Pod actually discourages interacting with your opponent, simply because if you try to interact with a Birthing Pod deck, they're going to beat you on multiple fronts.
I mean, I completely disagree with you on that, because we both played Tarmo Twin and we both had an insane matchup against them by interacting with them.
No, we had an insane matchup because we were able to game 1 combo kill them with very little hate from their side, and after game 1 we had multiple Anger of the Gods.
And Ancient Grudges and Tarmogoyfs to block, and...
I mean, I've played a lot of Magic Online with the deck. You say that like Tarmo Twin is heavily favored versus Birthing Pod. I think it's really close to a coin flip. Like, I've beaten people like Sam Party on Moto and people that I really respect as Birthing Pod players, but at the same time I've lost to, you know, people just getting nut draws against me with Birthing Pod. And the deck is really, really resilient and strong. Like, the deck can function very well without Birthing Pod. But the games where they draw Birthing Pod are just completely one-sided and unfair.
And that can happen, and I guess that's the bad feeling of this card takes multiple turns to win the game. And so most times with combo decks and old formats, it's like you're playing against Sneak and Show, and they just cast Show and Tell into Sneak Attack, kill you with Emrakul, and you're like, well, that game's over. As opposed to when you play against Birthing Pod, it takes 4 or 5 turns for them to win the game, and it just feels bad. It's kind of that emotional connection to how long the game takes.
It's an emotional drowning, you know? Like, you feel like maybe I have a chance to win, but really you just don't, and you don't see yourself being dead until 4 turns later. But that 4 turns, it takes them 10 minutes to search through their deck 3 times and all this other stuff.
I mean, those are some bad things about Modern where there's a lot of shuffling, but my last point is you should never ban a card that does cool things and it helps other decks do cool things with creatures, because if we don't find the line
Green Sun Zenith.
It should come back. I don't think it's that bad of a card.
Let's actually...
it's a horrible card to be in the format.
Yeah, he just flip-flopped real bad against
me.
Green
Sun Zenith is busted because it's a one-man accelerant.
Yeah, Green Sun Zenith, I don't trust that card in Modern. Yeah. But let's look at this ban restricted announcement from a different angle. Were there any cards that you guys were hoping would come back, would be unbanned?
Ancestral Visions?
Jason the Mind Sculptor.
Shut up!
Interesting.
Blasphemy.
Okay. Yeah, no. I think Visions is actually too good. Just because it's one of those cards that you suspend and then you go interact with your opponent, interact with your opponent, interact with your opponent, I win the game because I just do 3 extra cards.
Yeah, I mean, it is very similar to something like Sphinx's Revelation, where it encourages you to interact with your opponent for the first couple turns of the game, and then, you know, you get this big gust, you know, later in the game, but the fact that it only costs 1 mana is kind of ridiculous, I'm not going to lie. But I think that is mitigated by the fact that if you draw it on turn 3, 4, 5, it's just unbelievably bad. And, you know, cards I think that are really good on turn 1 and really bad later in the game are okay to have in the format. So I would actually, especially when Remand is running around in every single blue deck, you know, remanding Ancestral Vision is just vomit-inducing. Yeah. So I think it's very possible that Ancestral Visions could get unbanned. I'm personally just a fan of unbanning something every time the format, you know, like, could have a change, and there's specific cards that don't seem like all that ridiculously overpowered. I mean, we saw what happened when they unbanned Wild Nikado on Bitter Blossom. There were no copies in the top 8 of the Pro Tour and no copies in the top 8 of the Grand Prix. So it's just interesting that, you know, I would love them to continue the trend of unbanning, you know, maybe 1 or 2 cards at a time just to see if the format can handle it.
Okay, new answer, Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, no. I vote we never let Brad choose what gets unbanned, by the way. I'll tell you some cards that I want to see unbanned. I want to know what would happen if they unbanned Golgari Grave Troll or Dread Return.
I think people would vomit in their mouths because they'd have to play against Dread Return again.
Dredge was the most awful Magic ruining deck of all time, in my opinion.
I have a really good point to make about Dredge.
Strong.
So Dredge is not a Magic deck.
No, it isn't.
Dredge is like an Uno deck, and you have to literally bend space and time to try to interact with your opponent while they're just like, oh, draw 4, draw 8, you know, oh, deck you or whatever. You know.
Yeah, no, I think Dredge is just a non-Magic deck. It's counterintuitive the way all the other decks interact. So the entire format, regardless if the deck is good or bad, has to bend around this deck that could be bad. It's just because it's part of the format, you just have to bend your entire sideboard and your strategy around it.
4+ anti-graveyard cards in your sideboard just in case, because Dread Return on Flamekin Zealot is just the actual nuts. So.
Yep.
Fine. Jeez, bunch of haters over here.
I mean, you guys let us know in the comments if you think Dredge is something you want to interact with, because I've seen it in Standard, Legacy, Extended,
I know how that's
Modern.
Gonna go too.
It's
so
awful.
Yeah, it's not. It's never fun to play with or against.
No. Okay. Unless you can play Trinket Mage, Tormod's Crypt, and Tezzeret, because man, I should just build that deck. Man, I miss that.
All right.
Tezzeret the Seeker. That's next.
Enough about Modern. Let's talk about Standard, because there's a fresh Standard that people are going to get to play for the first time this week. We're going to talk about that in the learning curve. I know that all of us here are just itching to play some Journey into Nyx Standard.
Oh, I cannot wait.
So if you were going to the Open this weekend in Cincinnati, what deck would you play?
I already have it sleeved up because Evan and I both open enough Mana Confluences for myself, and that's the only card I need. I would play Brave Naya, and I still might even go to Cincinnati just to play this deck. It's the deck that I loved the most last format, but the mana just wasn't correct for the deck. Like, you couldn't get enough colored sources, so you had to play Temples, and because you played Temples, you played more colored cards because you have all the mana anyway. But now with Mana Confluence, you get to make the deck more white, splashing both green and red, and still have that just ultimate punish you mid-game with like Gore Clans and Boros Charms and Brave the Elements. And the deck is just amazing. I think it's a very smart choice for anyone that wants to go beat down but still have cards like Boros Reckoner that get very good when the format gets more aggressive, along with Brave the Elements is just great against removal. Like, I think the deck is just perfect for the metagame and finally has the right card to make the mana work.
Okay, fair enough. I have I want to go in kind of the same direction, but go a little bit bigger, maybe.
Oh, bigger? I thought you were going to go smaller with you being the whole Selesnya guy.
That would be sweet too, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of split. I think green-white would be a decent choice this weekend. Actually, I'm really interested in green-red monsters.
Oh, go on. You can get me behind some green-red monsters.
You're all right with green-red too? Yeah. Well, I think that the new toys that people have gotten with Journey into Nyx, they're going to push them in 2 directions. Some people are going to want to play Banishing Light. Naturally, that card's sweet. So I think there are going to be more white decks in general. Blue-white control is going to pick up a little more, I think. And they're going to be way more aggressive decks because of Mana Confluence, because of some of the new little beaters that we've gotten. And I think Green-Red Monsters is positioned perfectly to take advantage of that.
I mean, I agree with you. Like, Green-Red Monsters has always been a mid-range deck, but the other mid-range strategies always like fought it, like mono-black.
Yeah. Stormbreath Dragon, I think, is the absolute perfect threat to be presenting in a Banishing Light format. I think that Courser of Krufix and Scavenging Ooze give you a lot of leeway and a lot of backup in a really aggressive format. So yeah, well, and the other big thing is I think that Mono Black Devotion, kind of the traditional, as you said, the mid-range monster that's been dominating Standard lately. I think that deck is going to take a back seat, at least for a little while. And that deck was kind of one of Green Red's biggest predators, I think.
Exactly. I mean, Stormbreath Dragon is such a good Magic card, but it gets brick-walled by Demon that comes down earlier. So. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the one big thing that Green-Red Monsters needs to figure out is it can't just run 4 Mistcutter Hydras on the board anymore and just be like, easy peasy, beautiful cover girl, because you have to deal with Banishing Light.
That is true. But I think that Green-Red can handle those control matchups pretty well just by jamming a bunch of Planeswalkers and things like that.
And Mana Confluence, if you want to run a couple, will help you out with turn 2 Domri way more.
For sure. Todd, what would you play this weekend?
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say blue-white control. You know.
That's a tough limb.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've been waffling back and forth between trying to splash red or just like maybe trying to keep playing Esper. But I think just actual blue-white control is going to be where you want to be as a control deck, simply because having all of your lands come into play untapped, or more of your lands come into play untapped, is going to be huge for you in a format centered around mana confluence. People are going to be playing these hyper-aggressive builds that start with 1, 2, and 3 drops, and you're going to need to interact with them on turns 2 and 3 before you actually get the Supreme Verdict, or you could just be dead before you actually get to cast it. I'm a huge fan of Quicken right now. I think playing 4 Azorius Charms and multiple Last Breaths is probably going to be what you want to do, and then getting Banishing Lights in addition to Detention Sphere to help fight against Planeswalkers, as well as just be like a generally decent spot removal spell, is going to be exactly where you want to be in the format. So I'm a huge fan of blue-white control. Take it however you want it.
I mean, I agree. Like, I also think that it getting Reprisal and giving it a real answer to cards like Obzida and Mr. Hydra. Well, not Stormbright Dragon. I mean, you're going to have to wrath that away, but you have Quicken, you have Blind Obedience if you want it.
Yeah, and I can just dissolve it. So.
Exactly.
Stormbright Dragon, while it is a very powerful threat against you, it's not nearly as good as something like Mistgar Hydra, I don't think.
Well, and that's the thing about blue-white control before, is the reason it was so bad is because all of these different types of things were trying to kill it. You had Rakdos Return that you could counter, but if they ever played Sire of Insanity, you had to counter that too. But now you have Reprisal to come in against the other cards like Polar Kranos. Mistgar Hydra used to be a big problem, but not only does Blind Obedience, Quicken, Supreme Verdict were your answers before, but now you have Reprisal. Like, I think that card helps bridge against all these specific things. Also, you have more Detention Sphere effects against the Planeswalker, so you can't just say, I'm going to just try to play a different Planeswalker every turn and hope that wins the game. So yeah, I think that blue-white control is probably one of the best choices as well.
Sure.
Definitely.
We should do a versus video next week on that matchup.
I think we will.
I think we will too.
Plans have been made.
Shameless plug.
Might be coming. So those are the decks that we would play this weekend. We want to know what you would play. Talk back to us in the comments. Let us know what you guys think the best Week 1 standard deck
I'm going to
would
make
be.
someone's day real quick. That guy who always posts his Jund Blitz deck, you should post that. I don't remember his name, but that guy just made his day.
I don't know what deck you're referring to, but
you'll see it.
I'm
It'll be
interested
there.
to see it. Yeah, that
It'll
sounds
be there.
legit.
I'll comment on it this time. I promise.
Cool. The Star City Games Open Series comes to Cincinnati this weekend. Be there if you can, but if you can't, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, and Nick Miller will be bringing you all the coverage on SCG Live. But as for us, we are all curved out.
I'm not. I want to keep going. Let's talk about more.
Shut up, Brad.
But as for us, we are all curved out. For Brad and Todd, I'm Andrew Shrout. Thanks for watching. I know that all of us here are itching to play some Standard. So,
I'm
Brad,
just itching.
Yeah? All right. Probably the biggest story, kind of the biggest hype that came around out of
I would just start over. We had a lot of stuttering there.
That it was.
Yeah, that's not something you want to do on air when people watch you.
I caught that.
Okay, but you're not starting right now, so you're doing a good job. Maybe we can keep this going.
Okay.
You
true.
only adopted the magic. I was
Born in it.
Bane Cat. Bane Cat's a nut.
The Bane Cat thing is absurd. It's so good. I peed in it.
All right.
I peed in it. You know I'm going to have to kill you now.